think this was actually probably one of my favourite ACA exams. So some of you might be thinking, oh my god, weird, why? This exam honestly didn't really have too many surprises. Once you really understand the content and the structure, you're probably good to go if you have put in that hard work. There are though pretty wordy answers that are required in this exam that should not be underestimated. I was able to comfortably pass FM with a score of 83, and hopefully you can do the same. FM has 4 key examinable areas. Once you break it down, it makes it a lot easier to digest. So the 4 syllabus areas behind this 2.5-hour exam include investment appraisal, business valuation, financing options, and managing financial risk. So of course these areas can be, split down into further topics, but that is the general gist. You might be thinking, I've never heard of these areas before. I haven't really been examined in the exams prior to this. However, FM is actually a prerequisite for the advanced level strategic business management exam. It will definitely help nailing this now if you can. Starting off with investment appraisals or investment decisions, and also lumping that with business valuations, that can actually come to 35 marks of your FM paper. This is usually calculating whether an investment decision will be profitable for its shareholders using the net present value model. You may also need to make replacement decisions on assets, and what's really helpful about this exam is that you are actually provided with discount rate tables, so you aren't completely left on your own. With investment appraisal, I found that once you've practiced enough questions and you really start to nail that pro forma, you should really start to pick up the easy marks. They can sometimes make it tricky, so you do need to be careful that you are really reading the wording. So for example, whether an asset was purchased at the start of the year or at the end of the year, that will have an impact on your calculation. Moving on to business valuations, which actually could be quite interesting. But it might initially seem as though there's quite a lot of new content here, and what I found helps is actually linking 2 areas together. So this kind of, minimizes how much you actually need to learn. This includes the SVA valuation. So if you link that to investment appraisal, and it actually uses the same 7 value drivers. Discounting a company's future cash flows to the present value is similar to calculating a project at present value by discounting future cash flows. And then dividend valuation model, which can also link to financing options. The next 35 marks is on financing options, and a big part of this is calculating the WACC, so the weighted average cost of capital. For this question, there's actually quite a lot of formulas to learn, but I think once you've kind of learned and practiced, again, you should be okay. You definitely do need to ensure that you are not neglecting that debenture versus right issue potential question. My September 2019 exam had no WACC in it at all, and it did have the rights versus debenture issue. Honestly, I was actually very thankful that I had quickly revisited this the night before. The remaining 30 marks is around managing financial risk, and this can involve hedging techniques used on foreign currency, or it can be on, for example, interest rate hedges or swaps. So it actually does then also cover quite a bit, but remember, it can all be linked. For me, this was probably the most difficult area of the exam to begin with. It was pretty confusing, I guess. It made sense, the concepts made sense, but it was just hard to remember it all and to know what to do and when. It was honestly just practice. I used to use rubbish tricks to try and remember things. For example, put is sell because P and S are close together in the alphabet. Thinking back now, I don't even know if that actually makes sense. It can, however, get a bit confusing depending on which currency the question is denominated in, so really look out for the wording. Surprisingly, for this exam, you'd think it'd be quite calculation focused, but actually 30 to 40% of this exam requires some wordy answers, so you need to put that narrative together. Do not underestimate this. 30 to 40% is a lot. I kind of neglected the wordy part, so I would just leave it to the side and thought, yeah, I can learn it later. I think what would have really helped my understanding is if I had built it up as I went along. I realised in my mock exam that I was just losing a lot of marks here. What I then found is, of course, the explanations really do demonstrate your understanding of the topic. Of those 4 key syllabus areas, wordy questions can come up for honestly any of those. So from memory, I spent a lot of time on the narrative behind gearing and shareholder wealth. The M&M theory actually comes up here, and I initially found it again to be quite confusing, but then I decided to just think about it a bit more logically. Debt is less risky than equity, so of course it will be cheaper. Other common areas that are examined where you need to give wordy answers are, for example, real options, managing financial risk, the pros and cons of business valuation, and also equity sources and dividend policy. So it may sound like a lot, but honestly, after a lot of question practice, you'll start to see that kind of similar things do keep coming up. A good example is, the advantages of forward contracts versus futures. And if you just kind of learn it in a standardized table and memorize it, it will really help you just kind of flesh that out in the exam. I will keep saying it is just practice with this exam regardless of your academic background. If you practice, you should really hopefully be able to pass. So with FAR, it was a consolidation a day keeps the resit away, and I tried to apply that to FM, and what I did was actually one financial risk management question a day. So this is actually 30% of the exam, so I thought, why not actually just try and nail this where I could. Of course, there are subtopics within this, but once you're practicing daily, you'll start to kind of pick up the common themes. I found this was an area where I was really able to learn from my mistakes. What helps actually is leaving a few of these questions unseen before the exam, so you can just make sure that you actually know how to do it properly. Next then is not just solely focusing on the calculations. Make sure you know those explanations, you understand the theory, and you can really apply it to questions from early on. Make use of the discount rate tables so you aren't actually wasting time in the exam, but also just understand how to use the formula in case you do actually need that. And finally, ICAEW do always provide plenty of resources, especially those ICAEW sample assessments, so do really make use of those. The software is constantly changing and you do need to make sure that you're familiar with this. I would always practice in the software, take a snip of this and put it into Excel, and then just create my own working papers for each of the 4 areas. And then it's all just in one place where I can see those and really learn from my mistakes. But I am also then getting that software practice, which is vital. Tip 2 is always show your workings. So there's no negative marking in these exams. You should also get carry through marks. Even if you think you're just not getting it, you may still be picking up marks for your working. Next we have timing. It's a 2.5-hour exam, so it is 1.5 minutes per mark. As always, I would strongly recommend sticking to your timing. I'm not sure if it is because I had done a lot of practice, but this exam I actually found it to probably be maybe the least time pressured of all the professional level exams. I even had time to go back and check my answers. Hopefully you're in the same boat, so do really use that timing to your advantage, but always make sure that you know when you should need to move on from each question. Finally, I know that I've really implied that FM is a repetitive exam, but do not get thrown in the real exam if they kind of reorder questions or muddle things up a bit. So try not to focus too much on your expectation of what you think might come up. So, for example, question 1, investment appraisal. If you really have done the practice for this exam, just take a step back, have a little breather, and then approach the exam with confidence, because you should really be okay. Those are my financial management tips. I think it is not an easy exam, but if you do really put in the work, wrap your head around the content and put in the time, then you should be okay for this exam. I hope you found this video helpful. If you did, then do give me a like. Any questions, drop them in the box below. I'd be happy to answer those. And as always, I'll be back with more videos every single week, so make sure to subscribe and hopefully you'll see me again soon. Thanks.